All right, so we're good, right?
I can hear you and see you. Perfect.
All right, man. Well, thanks for joining me on this. I appreciate you coming on here.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. So you're the legendary Jim Darby, as I like to say. Roy's told me many stories of you, all good stuff. I actually spoke to somebody at Easton, Brian Kay, and he was like very impressed that I got you to come on here. So I appreciate you coming on here. How are you doing? Where are you, in California?
Yeah, I'm in Northern California. And by the way, thanks for having me. Yeah, Northern California, just hanging out like everybody else.
Yeah, it's everybody in your family safe, healthy, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually at my son's house today, and it's his 34th birthday. So
Oh,
we're celebrating that. But everybody's good. How about yours? I hope everybody. How's your dad doing?
everybody's good. Yeah, my dad's good. He's in the other office right now, so everybody's good. We're all good, trying to hang on there and try to hope for a baseball season, for a big summer season and a big fall season. So it could be the
Yeah.
biggest fall ball ever, right?
I hope so, man. I really do, because we sure do miss baseball.
I know. I'm hearing reports that like Major League Baseball will come back, and I just think that will get kind of the morale boost of like the total country back. So I think that would be really nice. That would be a nice. My birthday is Tuesday, so that would be a nice birthday present just to hear like Major League Baseball has a plan in place, even if that plan doesn't work out. So
Yeah, no, I think it would give us all hope, which, I hope we're all getting now anyway. But, and you guys, particularly in the East Coast, have been hit so hard with this, man. I feel for everybody back there.
yeah, absolutely. So why don't we? I'm going to do the intro to this later on, but why don't you tell everybody like kind of your background in baseball, how you got started? Did you play baseball growing up, and did you love baseball early on and stuff like that? I mean, you've worked in this industry long enough to, I'm sure you liked baseball growing up, but was that your main sport growing up?
Yeah, I mean, back in the 50s and 60s when I grew up, kids pretty much played all sports. So you went season by season. It wasn't so specialized like it is today. But baseball was my favorite. And like most kids my age then, collected the baseball cards, and we had our heroes of our home teams and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I played, when I got to high school, I played three sports. I was a cross country runner, played basketball, and played baseball. Kind of wished I had played football, but I noticed that I wasn't the biggest guy, and I noticed some of the bigger guys were playing. So I ran cross country instead. And then I wasn't a real great high school player, but I was good enough to get a couple scholarship offers for college. So played a little bit of college baseball. I mean, I had a uniform every year, but I didn't get on the field very much.
Eh,
But the experience
yeah.
was phenomenal. I mean, I look back on my college days, and it's funny because I look back on my college playing days, which wasn't a lot, but a lot on the bench, and but being with the guys, being on the team, was the main thing. And I have so many ex-teammates who, when we get around and we, get together for golf games or stuff like that, they almost speak negatively on it because they feel like they didn't do they had bad games or
Hmm.
stuff like that, or they were mad at the coach for some reason. I just look back on it and go, my God, I got a college uniform. How cool is that? And,
That's
and,
cool.
and, and I'm like everybody else, Max. I wanted to play pro ball, but the
Yeah.
reality was you get to a point where you realize, hey, there's a certain limit that you're going to get to.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely. So where after what did you major in college?
I majored, believe it or not, in physical education because
Okay.
I wanted to become a coach. That was my dream. And so I majored in phys ed at UC Berkeley. And in those days, phys ed degree, it was basically a pre-med degree. In
Hmm.
other words, it was all science classes.
Okay.
And so it was tough. It was a tough major.
And so from college, like you graduate, and kind of what is the plan? Like, are you playing baseball, trying to, play pro ball or anything like that? Or are you kind of coaching? Where do you go from that college?
Well, I was very fortunate. When I graduated from Cal, I then got a job as the pitching coach on the JV team at
Hmm.
Cal.
Okay.
And that's when colleges had JV teams.
Yeah.
And so I was the assistant coach of the Cal JV team in 74. And then in 75, I got the job as as varsity pitching coach at St. Mary's College, which is
Hmm.
here in Northern California. And then in 76 and 77, I went back to Cal as the varsity pitching coach.
Okay. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, did you kind of like, were like, hey, I'm kind of done with the coaching aspect? Like, how does one end up at kind of like the, knowing your story, how do you end up working obviously for Easton? There's a lot that has to come into play there. So
It was all, fate. And
yeah.
as most everything is, after to be honest with you, I read a book in 1976 called Shogun. It was a
Mm.
bestseller by a guy named James Clavell, a novel about Japan. And I got so turned on to reading this book that I had this big urge that I wanted to go to Asia.
Mm.
So one night over a couple of pitchers of beer, I think it was only a couple, a teammate of mine at Cal, who at that point was in law school, he had read the same book, and we both agreed, God, it'd be great to go to Asia. How can we get there? Because we had no money.
Yeah.
When I was coaching, college baseball coaches back in the 70s made zero. I mean, it was so I had no money. So we came up with the idea, why don't we form a baseball team and go play baseball in Asia?
Like an amateur team?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was playing, I was going to grad school then at San Francisco State University. And there was a guy in one of my classes who was from Taiwan, whose dad was head of some sports federation in Taiwan. And I told him what we wanted to do. And he said he could probably get us some help. And then there was another guy who had connections with Cal Berkeley, a Japanese fellow who was a scout for Japanese teams, a scout trying to get U.S. players to go play in Japan, which was kind of unusual then, not so much now. Anyway, he agreed to help us. So to be frank with you, we begged, borrowed, and stole as much. I mean, we did everything we could to get this team together. And we ended up 19 guys that we went to Taiwan for 2 weeks and Japan for a week in the summer of 77, playing baseball and running around, just having a great time. And it turned out that when we were in Osaka, Japan, I was in the lobby of the hotel, and a guy walked up to me, a Japanese fellow, spoke great English, and said he had heard about our team and he worked for a sporting goods company in Japan, that I didn't know the name of. And he said, would your team like to try some of our products? And I felt like saying to the guy, boy, have you seen us play? By the way, our record on the trip, we had 16 games in both Taiwan and Japan. Our record was 2-14. So yeah, we had one guy on the team who did end up going to play in the big leagues for a cup of coffee. His name was Steve Brown. He pitched for the Angels for a season. But by and large, we were just a bunch of college guys,
just enjoying Japan
and Taiwan, right? And the truth of the matter is, it's kind of tough to really get into baseball when you're doing that. But but we had a great time playing ball too. Anyway, so this guy tells me, if you guys would like to come to our store, we'd like to show you our baseball products. And I'm going, boy, I mean, seriously? So I get the guys, and we go to this 6-story building, huge building.
Wow. Okay.
Each floor had its own sporting goods, like skiing, golf, apparel, and then baseball. And when I saw the gear, Max, I couldn't believe it. I go, my God, I mean, I didn't know people made baseball gear like this. This is good stuff.
Okay.
Anyway, the name of the company was Mizuno.
Okay.
So now you know the connection here.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So they outfitted each guy with a glove, pair of spikes. It was awesome, right?
Wow.
So now our trip ends. I get back to the States. While we were in Japan, my boss, the head coach at Cal, had been fired. So now I'm out of a job.
Oh.
Okay. And so I'm looking, like for a month, I'm applying everywhere. I mean, anything, just a job. I mean, you got to work.
Yeah.
And so one day I get a phone call from this fellow named George Sheldon. And he said he had gotten pictures of our baseball team from people in Mizuno, from the people at Mizuno. and wanted to forward them to me and wanted to know my address and all that stuff. And then he asked me, he said, who are you? And I said, I'm looking for a job is who I am. And it turned out the company that George Sheldon was president of was called Curly Bates Company.
Okay.
Curly Bates was a marketing distribution sporting goods company based in Northern California. And he told me that they were looking for a promotion manager because they were about to import this ball glove line, Mizuno, and that's why I hit the connection with him. And would I be interested in applying for the job as national promotion manager?
Of
And I
course.
just, oh. So I applied, and I, took some interviews, 2 or 3, different interviews. Like a month later, and I'm desperate for a job. I get a call back, and he offers me the job. And he said, by the way, another line that we're going to introduce, in addition to the Mizuno line that we're going to introduce to the U.S. market, we're going to introduce a line of aluminum bats called Easton.
And
There
that's
you
how
go.
that's how you get your start in the sports marketing aspect of things. You go
I got,
from, yeah.
right. So I was hired as national promotion manager in December of 1977.
Oof. Okay. And so, like, have you heard of the brand Easton before? This is brand new. Like, you knew Mizuno from over in Japan and your trip over there, so you were familiar with the Mizuno line of things, I guess. And this Easton brand, were you like, what is Easton? Like, who is Easton? Because at the time, doesn't Easton only make like archery arrows? Is that what they're coming from?
That's what they were known for,
Yes.
because Easton was an archery company, but they it was wooden arrows, for the 20s, 30s, 40s, and all. Well, when World War II ended, and Doug Easton, who owned the Easton Archery Company, could start fabricating tubing with aluminum, because they couldn't get aluminum during World War II, because it was going into the war effort. Anyway, they start fabricating aluminum arrows. Well, aluminum arrows then turned into tent tubing, bicycle frames, backpack frames, stuff like that, and then tennis rackets.
Okay.
One of the first aluminum tennis rackets, the frame was made by Easton. But the thing about Easton in those days, Max, back in those days, they never put their name on a product. They would make them for other manufacturers. Okay. So in the early days of the aluminum bats, Easton was making the aluminum bat for a company called Adirondack.
Okay.
Adirondack and Louisville Slugger were the two big baseball bat names in those days. But, they were both wood bats. That was the big deal. But they both had to start getting into aluminum because that's where it was shifting.
Yeah.
So Easton's making Adirondack aluminum bats. Okay, in 75, I think it was, or 76, Adirondack was purchased by a company that you've heard the name of called Rawlings.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Rawlings tells Easton, on the Adirondack bats, there was a little diamond E, the Easton logo, about that big. I'm telling you, that big. You couldn't even see it. Was on the barrel. You couldn't even see it. But they wanted that off the bat. And Easton wanted it to stay on the bat because he wanted people to know who made it. Okay? They have a big falling out. Rawlings basically thinks, well, anybody can make an aluminum tube bat. So contract ends. Easton doesn't have a customer to sell aluminum bats to. So this guy, George Sheldon, who remember I mentioned before, Curly Bates was the marketing firm and distribution firm for Adirondack on the West Coast. So at the same time that Rawlings dumps Easton, they also dump all their sales rep groups and go in-house.
Okay.
So now Curly Bates is out of a bat to sell. So Sheldon goes to Easton, Jim Easton, Doug Easton's son, who's now president of the company, and says, why don't you put the Easton name on a bat and we'll sell it? So that's how the Easton name got started. And that was in 76, 77, right when kind of I was getting started. So there was no real, Easton really wasn't a name like Adirondack or Louisville Slugger, or the other company that was a big name then was called Worth.
Okay.
And so those were the three big names that we had to compete against when we started.
Wow, that is, I could listen to that stuff kind of all day. I know that you wrote a book. Is in your book, is all that stuff there? Like you
Yeah.
telling that story, stuff like that? What's the name of the book? I know we'll get to that later, but what's the
Yeah.
name of the book?
It's called right off the bat.
Right off the bat. Okay. I mean, that's fascinating. I've heard, Roy said you're the guy. He goes, he's the guy that, he wrote the book on this stuff. He goes, I think he actually does have a book. And then we looked it up. So, yeah, I could listen to that stuff all day. So you actually do remember the first Easton like baseball bat that was out there on the market, or you came on like a little bit later on?
I do remember the first one because when I was coaching at Cal,
Yeah.
there were some Easton. They had just started the Easton line.
Yep.
In my last year coaching, there were a couple or two samples of it in our dugout. I remember that, but nobody used them. I mean, it just wasn't a brand yet that was recognized. But what kicked off the Easton brand, and
And what got them kind of like, yeah.
this is an amazing story. Okay, in '77, the season of 78, all of the aluminum bats, be it Worth, Adirondack, Louisville, or Easton,
Hmm.
the maximum barrel size that anybody could make was a 2.5-inch barrel.
Because you were limited technology wise, or because of the rules?
Technology.
Yeah.
The rule in those days, major league rule, was 2 3/4. You couldn't
Mhm.
make a bat bigger than that. Okay, so but Easton, remember now, aluminum tubing company, and Jim Easton, to his credit, was one of the greatest, aluminum engineers of all time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and the reason you could only make a bat 2.5 was because if you made a bigger barrel, it got too heavy.
Mm.
Okay, so Easton in May of 1978, and I remember this was my first full season promoting the Easton brand, and I would go to here in the Bay Area where I live, Stanford, Cal, San Jose State. I'd go to the games and watch, and I go, man, nobody's using Easton bats. I mean, it was depressing. Okay, so in May of '78, Easton, I go down to LA where the plant was in those days,
Hmm.
and they show me this new bat that they want me to take out and spread some around at the regionals, the
Yeah.
NCAA
Yeah.
regionals prior to the College World Series. And this bat, and your dad will remember this bat, I'll guarantee you. It's called the B5 Pro Big Barrel,
Mm.
affectionately known as the old Green Easton.
Yep.
And anybody who's watching this, older guys in particular, when I say Green Easton, their eyes are going to light up and go, God, I remember that bat. Okay. You may have had them as a kid. Anyway, so I went, I'll never forget this. I got like enough to have a sample bat for like every team in the regionals. And I got on an airplane, and I was at a regional in one place in the afternoon, and at night I'd be at another one, 1,000 miles away. I mean, I hit 8 regionals in 3 days
Wow.
and gave bats to, the teams that would take them. Believe it or not, there were some coaches who didn't want me giving bats to their team. They said, my team got here. I don't want you messing with their heads, and I understand that.
Yes.
Anyway, one of the teams that I started with was USC, which is because they were the closest one in LA. I gave them a couple of sample bats, and they hit them in BP, and they said, yeah, these are okay, good, whatever, Well, now the regionals end, and the College World Series starts.
Mhm.
And the College World Series is a big thing. Let's
Yeah.
face it, it's every game's on TV, But in those days, there was no TV. There was no ESPN until like 2 years later. So everything that you could do to promote an adult baseball bat in those days was via advertising or word of mouth. Okay.
Mm.
And the College World Series was it, because that's where you got your name going, right? So I remember there's a magazine called Collegiate Baseball, and it still exists. And I remember the Worth Company having an ad. I remember being in Jim Easton's office, and he was steaming. And Jim Easton's pretty, as your dad would tell you. I don't know if you ever met Jim, but
I
Jim,
never have. No, no.
even keel guy, doesn't get too excited. Like I tend to fly off a handle, but he's pretty even keel. But I was in his office, and he pulled out Collegiate Baseball, and this is like a month before the World Series. And he said, look at this ad. And it was an ad by the Worth Company.
Mm.
And it said, Worth does it again. dominated the 77 World Series, and they listed the usage of bats
Yeah.
at the 1977 College World Series. And it said Worth was like 60%, Louisville Slugger, 20% or 25%. Another company a little bit, and then it said wood bats were, some guys still swung wood, and then it had others.
Easton.
And then under others was Easton at like at like 1%. I mean, and Easton was steaming, man.
Yeah.
And he says, you get your what out there, and you better start getting guys using our bats. So anyway, so the Green Easton now, I've distributed them to some teams. We get to Omaha, and sure enough, USC had like 4 guys swinging the new Green Easton, right? That's a big deal. Okay, so as the series goes along, and I'm going to teams' practices, and I'm giving them more bats, more and more guys start swinging it. Now we get to the final, to the finals, and if we can have a team in the finals that swings predominantly Easton bats, boy, we just hit the jackpot, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the final game is between 2 teams that, if you look up who were on these 2 teams, it was probably the best college baseball game I've ever seen of MLB powers, guys who went on to the major leagues. USC against Arizona State. And I mean, Arizona State had Bob Horner, who was the rookie of the year. He immediately went to the big leagues after the series. They had Hubie Brooks, who played for years for the Mets. I mean, they were loaded. SC had 7 guys on their team who played in the big leagues.
Wow.
So, I mean, they were just awesome, right? Well, by the time we get to the championship game, 3 guys for Arizona State are swinging the Green Easton. 8 of the 9 starters on USC were swinging the Green Easton.
And you're rooting for USC.
Well, I'm rooting for both of them, because I mean, even 3 out of the 9 on Arizona State, but SC ended up winning.
Okay.
And I mean, you talk about a brand being launched. Of course, we come out with an ad, and it goes all the amateur. And so we ended up. I did the bat count. I sat and counted every at bat. I sat in the stadium every single at bat. We ended up with 33%. Now, Worth had more than we did. They were but we'd gone from like 1% to 33. Now, by the next year, 79 World Series, we were 80%.
With that same bat?
Same bat.
Okay.
And then in 1980, we were over, I think, 95%.
Wow.
And it stayed that way for the next 15 years. I mean, Easton just absolutely dominated the bat scene. Now, like I said, the Green Easton was a 2 5/8 inch barrel. In 82, we came out with a bat called the Black Magic. And the Black Magic, again, for the older guys who are listening and remember their high school days, I mean, the Green Easton and the Black Magic were literally almost 100% of the adult baseball business. And the Black Magic was a 2 3/4 inch barrel bat.
And
So
that must have been guys must have really liked that stuff, that like they could get that bigger barrel, and Easton was coming out with newer models and stuff like that.
Newer models, different alloys, then it kept changing. Now, that was great. And for 10 years, even longer, 10, 15 years, Easton was just absolutely dominating the bat market. But you also saw something happening. You saw the averages, the home runs, going up.
Yeah.
And the NCAA started to think, okay, this is maybe causing an imbalance in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you hear about that type of stuff when there's rule changes and kind of what was kind of your first, I don't know if we're skipping too far ahead, but what was the first time that you heard of like a league that was like going to change the rules and you're like, they can't do that, or like that's,
Well, let's backtrack a little bit because I'll tell you something interesting. Back in those days, there were a lot of coaches, particularly older coaches, who didn't like aluminum bats. Okay, now remember, composite bats didn't come in until right around 2000.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so everything was aluminum and or wood in the 80s and the 90s. There were a lot of old coaches who hated aluminum bats because they weren't traditional.
Yeah.
and they weren't used in the big leagues, blah, blah, blah. So the battle for, it was a constant battle where someplace somebody didn't want to have them banned.
Mm.
And they'd always come up with reasons. They would say, well, the game is out of balance. And or they would say, hey, these are unsafe. Now they
Mm.
always, and we can talk about that as we go along here.
Yeah.
That was always the one where, it made it very difficult for us. They'd claim, well, the ball jumps off the aluminum bat so much faster, they're unsafe. But they had no data to support that at all. Yet, some people would believe it. But the most interesting thing that I always looked at on this, in 70, the last year wood bats were exclusive to college baseball was 1973.
Mm.
You couldn't use an aluminum bat in college until 74, okay? Well, 73 happened to be the last year I played college baseball, so I remember that. Anyway, from 73 to 74, when they started using aluminum, the batting averages went up, the home runs went up. And so everybody pointed to that. And they said, look what happened to college baseball. We need to ban those bats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I went back and looked, and if you ever go look at the statistics of the American League at the exact same time, where they use wood only, the home runs, the batting averages, all went up just as much as the college game did.
Mm.
And you know why?
Players getting stronger, practicing more, ball.
No. There was one other thing that came along in 1974
Mm.
called the designated hitter.
Okay, there you go. Yep, there you go.
So when they would get on my case about the aluminum bat, I said, well, wait a minute. The aluminum, the averages went up just as much in pro ball as they did in college ball, folks. But see, those who didn't like the aluminum bat, they didn't want to hear that.
Mm.
So, it was always a pretty tough argument.
Was that one of your kind of when you're positioned at Easton? Was that always something they would come to you and complain, like the guys, and you would get a lot of bad negative feedback about the aluminum bats?
Well, I'm the one who's out in the field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the face guy, and I'm the one who's supposed to know all the coaches.
Yeah.
And so that was my job, was to promote the brand in a positive way.
Absolutely.
And if there was any negative, hey, turn that around.
Okay, so that was your kind of rebuttal to them, like, look at what's going on in Major League Baseball, that right?
Right. Well, yeah, and then I remember the Cape Cod League. They used to complain, and Cape Cod League, as you're probably aware of, is a collegiate summer league that a lot of pro guys, well, I mean, it's top notch, right?
Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of people who were complaining those guys shouldn't use aluminum bats because it's like pro ball, and they were complaining too many home runs, batting averages, and it wasn't traditional baseball. Well, the last year that they used aluminum bats in the Cape Cod League, I'm going back now, I think 1984, so it's quite a long time ago. But you know what the batting average was? The cumulative batting average for the league in 1984, when they used aluminum bats, and these were the Green Eastons or the Black Magics, which were great bats.
Yeah.
The league average was 274.
Okay.
Now I don't know about you, but
okay.
I like baseball when there's a combination of offense and defense. I don't, quite frankly, if I'm going to go to a ball game, I really don't want to see a 1-0 game.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see a 12-10 game. I want to see a 6-5 game. I want to see some offense. I want to see some defense. I want to see some good pitching. I want to see some strategy. So when they would complain to me about how the game is out of whack, I go, show me how it's out of whack. It's just, you don't like it because, you hear a ping instead of the crack of the wood bat.
That's a great point. So in your timeline on Easton, can you remember kind of, let's say, I know, because that's a really positive point on Easton. Do you remember kind of maybe the first negative bat that Easton came out with that you were like, oh, and you thought it was going to be the best thing, or you kind of knew, I don't know about this bat. Was there one bat in mind that you were like, this is going to be not a great bat?
Well, there's been a couple.
Yeah. And how do you
You
spin
know,
that around? How do you spin that around too? Kind of also,
it
it's tough.
it
And does that set you back a couple years too?
it can,
Yeah.
okay, depends how you handle it. Now, you know, first of all, understand that we came out with all the, you know, the great designs,
Yeah.
the B5 Pro Big Barrel, the Black Magic. Well, the other companies weren't sitting on their thumbs either.
Yeah.
You know, in a couple of cases, they hired away engineers that Easton had, and so they figured out how to make the same basic quality bats that Easton did. So it became, you know, pretty tough competition.
Hmm.
But we did have a couple of bats, which you guys might remember. I'm sure your dad does. We came out with a bat called the Zapper.
Mm.
And I don't know if you ever remember seeing it, but it had a,
I've heard, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it had a like a Z handle, and it allowed you to rotate your wrist over,
Mm.
but it looked funky.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a crooked handle bat, and we sold it for a couple of years, and then it kind of died. So it didn't really hurt us,
Mm.
but it wasn't great. The one that the one bat that Easton did come out with one time, and you got to remember, one of the things we always thought about was how do we innovate? How do we make
Yes.
it different, keeping within the rules of the game, but keep Easton ahead of the
Yes.
competition?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of our engineers came up with an idea, and I thought this was really terrific because this guy had played baseball, pro ball, and then but he was also an engineer. And he had, with his wood bats, he had broken his hamate bone. You've
Mm.
heard of those kind of injuries,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay? Well, he came up with a bat called the Torque.
Mm.
And this was like 4 or 5 years ago. So it was fairly recent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it allowed the bottom part of the handle to turn so that it took the stress off that part of the hand, and it was funky, but it really was a pretty good idea. The problem was we put a little. Now this is I was still working for Easton at that
Yeah. Yeah.
time. We put a lot of pizzazz into our sales efforts.
Yeah.
We loaded up retailers with them,
Mm.
and it just didn't catch on.
I,
So they're no longer even in the marketplace. But when you say set back a company, yeah, you come out with one that doesn't quite fly,
yeah.
and it can hurt. And that one did hurt.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. I remember Torque too, because it is fairly recent. I'm sure people watching and when I upload this will know what Torque was. And yeah, that was definitely one that might have hurt a little bit. Do you think you just think like baseball wasn't ready for that, or you think a combination, like too much involvement, like because it went from being I remember the first year just the one BB Core bat to like year 2 of Torque, it was like 8 different BB Core bats. It was a lot going into it. You doubled
Well,
down on it. You guys doubled down on it.
double down is exactly right. And too much inventory on the shelves, because let's face it, if you put too much inventory on a retailer's shelf,
Mm-hmm.
um, he's got to get rid of that before he can bring in any more of your bats. Well, if he's sitting on a bat that didn't really sell off well, which the Torque didn't,
Yeah.
it was too much out there.
Yeah.
And then so that set Easton back at least a year or two. Absolutely.
That's a great point. So also what was, because to take a step back, Easton was you guys were the first ones to come out with a 2-piece bat, correct?
Exactly. In the year 2000.
And was
Exactly
there
right.
negative feedback off of that, or was that from day one kind of like the next evolution of technology?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that question because I remember specifically we introduced that bat at the College World Series again in
That's
the
when
in
they
the
used to
year.
do stuff at the College World Series.
Oh yeah, we would, we'd make a big promotion out of it, and we'd make sure we had guys there that were at practices because that was that it gave you a reason to exist. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I mean, it made you valid if you had, usage of your product. And one of my biggest fears always was that, we would get there and there's another thing I'll bring up here in a second, but we would get there and nobody would be swinging our bats.
Oof.
That was always, and this is kind of interesting because from 78, that first year I told you about the SC Arizona game when Easton kind of made its mark, until 93, it was just open competition. We would overload the college market with promotions. I mean, we went nuts. We wanted to make sure. I mean, if one bat showed up that wasn't our bat at Omaha, we went ballistic. I mean, it was guerrilla warfare. In fact, I remember the Holiday Inn, one of the Holiday Inns in Omaha that we stayed at. We rented rooms for each guy, each one of our promo reps who went, but we also rented a room that we simply filled with bats.
Mm.
I mean, hundreds of bats. So it was that important to us. Well, in '93, one of our competitors, Louisville Slugger, finally came up with a way to compete with us. And to be fair to them, their bats were good. They had hired away a couple of Easton engineers, and there was nothing wrong with their bats. They just didn't hustle like we did, quite frankly. Well, in '93, they hired a guy, and he started going to the college coaches and offering them contracts and offering them money to say, okay, University of Texas, coach, we'll give you X amount of money.
Is that the first time you heard of somebody doing that?
Yeah, and I can tell you the exact story. I was in my office in Northern California, and I got a phone call from a guy named Tommy Harmon. Tommy Harmon was the assistant coach at University of Texas. And, you know, Texas was a big program. There were like 10 programs, like, you know, that, boy, you wanted to hang your hat on. Arizona State, Texas, Miami, LSU, you know, USC, they were the big names. Well, I get a call from Tommy, and he says, Darbs, he said, we got a problem. I go, what? He said, Coach Gustafson is about to sign a contract with Louisville Slugger where our kids will have to use their bats. And I said, you got to be kidding. I said, although in the back of my head, I'd been thinking, if I were them, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah. Why? Yeah.
So I called Coach Gus, who was a good friend of mine. And I said, are you really going to do that? He said, well, and he was right about this, Max. He said, college coaches don't make, now they make great money today, but not then.
Not in the 90s, yeah.
And the amount of money they were offering him, you know, was significant. And he said, you know, so of course, then I immediately called Jim Easton and said, hey, we got to get the checkbook out because we don't want to lose our, you know. So it became a bidding war between us and Louisville. And then, of course, Rawlings and the other bat companies got involved. And I had a lot of people kind of, you know, they'd say coaches shouldn't do that. How can that be allowed? How can a college coach? That's just wrong. And I'd say to the person who would say that to me, I'd say, well, do you think it's wrong that, you know, a college football coach gets money from Nike and they wear Nike football shoes? Well, that's different. I go, why is it different? Same thing. Or, you know, like Coach K. How much do you think Coach K makes at Duke? Yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, the guy makes over, you know, millions of dollars from Nike. Well, what shoes does Duke wear? There you go.
Nike, yeah.
So anyway, it became a big bidding war, and we got our schools, and Louisville got theirs, and then Rawlings got theirs. So my fear, I swear, I would go through the month of May prior to the baseball regional starting. I couldn't sleep because my biggest fear was that the schools we had would bomb out, and we would have, and one of the 8 teams that went to Omaha,
be like, oh yeah,
no Easton at all. I mean, it's like
it sometimes happens now. Whether you see like
it never happened that we got 0. There were 2 or 3 years where we only had 1 team, but thank God for that 1 team.
So that was definitely a hurdle. And then also, I don't know the exact year, but early 90s, a new company comes on the block, DeMarini. So I don't know if there was any fear in a DeMarini company. There's another.
You bet there was. And DeMarini is owned by Wilson.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they made a big input too. Let me tell you. So between Louisville, DeMarini, Rawlings, and now you have Marucci.
And at this point, Worth is gone. Worth doesn't make baseball bats, right? So Worth is kind of early 90s, maybe phasing them out. So
they were still in the business, but they did not have the technology at that point to do what the other companies did.
Yeah.
They kind of faded out.
And then that first 2-piece bat. So what was the feedback? And if you could remember that, like walk us through that first 2-piece bat.
I remember looking at it at a when I went down to Easton to the plant, they showed it to me, and I thought it looked kind of funky.
Mm.
But again, we're trying to innovate. We're trying to be
Yes.
different, right? And I said, well, what's the point? And they said this will allow a little more spring out of the barrel and all that stuff.
Mm.
So I took it again to Omaha and gave it to some teams. And believe it or not, I always joke about this, but I always say the millennium started in the year 2000, right?
Mm.
Now, some people say 2001. I said it started in the year 2000. The first time a 2 was in front of a number of the years, right?
Yeah.
The first at bat in the new millennium was a kid from San Jose State, and he was using a 2-piece bat.
That is awesome. That's and then also when composite comes about, is that a whole different, like your head's ready to explode, like
it's a total different animal. And one of the big kicks on the composite, Max, was the sound, because it sounded more traditional.
Yes.
So here, it's funny, guys in my position in promotions, you would take a bat to a team, and you get them around, you tell them about the bat, but what it came down to is when the first batter took the bat and he stepped in the batting cage, you prayed that he hit the first ball hard, because if he no, I'm not kidding you, because if he popped it up, or if he got jammed and the ball didn't go anywhere, oh, believe me, the rest of the team saw that and their attitude was, oh, that bat doesn't have any pop. And there were many times when I would go to a team and I would ask their coach, who's throwing batting practice today, and if he said it was one of their pitchers throwing batting practice, I was very careful about letting them try the new bat. If it was one of the coaches throwing, oh yeah, go ahead and try it. Because if it was a pitcher, I don't care what pitcher it is. If you're throwing batting practice, you're still got a little bit in your head of being competitive. And you may throw, or you may throw a little harder than a coach would in BP. So you're always careful who you promoted the bat to, who was going to throw BP that day. And there were many times where I volunteered to throw BP. And I did.
That's awesome, man.
well, hey, listen, guys could hit off me even when I tried to get them out. Can you imagine what it was like when I was just trying to lay it in there?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Easton kind of is cruising, it seems like, obviously the 2000s from what I can remember. When does it become, college is very important up to this point. So when does kind of the idea to get into the youth market? Because it seems like that's really a new wave of things in the last decade or so. When does that kind of wave come?
Well, it was always there.
Yeah.
I mean, because, but the beauty of the colleges and the College World Series and the way it was in the 80s and the 90s was there was always the thought that the filter would be down from if the college used it, like if St. John's used it, or you're in Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say Rutgers or Princeton, let's say they were using it, that the high schools in the area
would use it,
and then filters. Yeah. It would filter down to the little leagues, because there was the game really wasn't on TV in those days. Okay. Well, what kind of changed, and then of course we would promote as best as that we could at the Little League World Series, because that was on TV. Back in the 80s and 90s, they'd only show 1 or 2 games, not like it is today where every game's shown. But Little League is very, very stringent on their rules about promoting products. You can't just show up at Williamsport like we would do at Omaha.
So Omaha was a little lax and kind of like the Wild West, it seems, compared to Williamsport.
It was. We knew, like I said, at Omaha, we knew where the practice fields were. We got the practice schedule. So if, let's say, LSU was going to practice at a field, I would be there, or one of my guys would be there, and we would make sure that, we were promoting the daylights out of our product to those guys at every practice. See, but at Little League, you can't do that. They don't want manufacturers on site. And I get it, because let's face it, they don't want kids becoming or coaches at that level, or the kids being handed money or something behind the scenes. So we had to be very careful how we did it at Little League, but we tried our hardest. I mean, we stayed within the rules, but we would make sure we would try to get, bats there. But college baseball was still kind of the cat's meow then. But you know what changed everything pretty much, Max? Is the internet.
Mm.
Because the internet, now kids are talking to themselves, via the internet and what's hot and all that stuff. So, the visual you get at Omaha, or the visual you get at Williamsport, or any other of the youth leagues who are on television, the games are televised. It's important. You still want it, but it's not as much as a need as reaching the kid today via the internet and that kind of marketing.
That's a great point. So you think Omaha has, not that it's lost its luster, but it's not as important as it once was.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Still, you still want the visibility.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily what sells the bat to the kids.
I would agree with that, because now you have like somebody, like they're using, the one piece aluminum bat from Easton or a different manufacturer, and they're not quite using the high priced bat or the middle bat. They're using the very basic type of bat. It has changed a lot from what it sounds like it once was. I mean, I remember also early 2000s, it was definitely also more technology driven. Now it seems like the kids are going very basic bat.
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, and now there's another catch to this, which is going to go to exactly what you just said. All right. In 92, I remember, and this was fostered by a guy who was an NCAA on the rules committee. And he was not a guy, he was one of the old guys who didn't like aluminum bats.
Okay.
And boy, they started scrutinizing everything in terms of, I mean, he basically wanted to outlaw aluminum bats for college baseball is what this guy wanted to do, or put restrictions on them that, because in the 90s, up until the 2000s, there really were no restrictions. Okay.
You can make a barrel this big, and
well, you could only make the barrel 2 3/4, but there was nothing about exit velocity or testing, So but where it hit the fan. So every year we're battling the NCAA on, and I'm getting all the statistics, and I'm in constant contact with coaches, and but in 98, and you were probably too young to remember this, but the offenses had really kind of gone pretty high, and the bat technology really was up there.
Yeah.
Well, in 98, in the final game of the College World Series, USC again played Arizona State, and the final score of the game was 21-14.
Oof.
And that was about it. The NCAA had enough, and they started putting rules, parameters on what the bat manufacturers could make, okay, and what we could do in terms of performance. Not, now the two-piece bat came out 2 years later, but the performance of that bat couldn't be any higher than a one-piece bat, for example. So as we've gone along in time, now we go 20 years into the, now we're in 2020.
So is that your first rule change that you're dealing with at Easton? Like your first real, like kind of, hey, they put the hammer down?
In 98.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, they said no more 2 3/4 inch barrel bats, number one. And the bats had to be -3.
Okay.
In other words, if it was a 33-inch bat, it couldn't be 4 ounces lighter. It couldn't be a 33-29 like the old green Easton was.
So what we know today,
the parameters and specifications of the bat today are what they came out with in 1998. Now, what that did then is it pretty much commoditized the bats. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think Easton still makes great bats. I think Louisville, I think DeMarini, all of them make great bats. Is there a huge difference in the bats? Absolutely not. I mean, it comes down to cosmetics.
Yeah.
It comes down to is there a function like the torque? Is there something that would turn a kid on, or is the barrel rolled over? The sound of the bat. But in terms of it being able to hit it further, so if you see an ad that this bat has more pop than this bat, it's all in the eyes of the beholder, because the reality is we all make bats that get right to that limit, but we don't go over, because if we do, you're
Yeah,
gone.
absolutely. So prior to then, you could make a bat that was like somebody would be like that Easton bat has way more
Oh
pop
yeah.
than yeah.
Oh yeah. We actually came out with a bat one time, and your dad will remember this, called the titanium bat.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, the name of the bat was the Typhoon. And we only made it for softball to
Yeah.
start, and it lasted about a month before the associations banned it.
Oof.
Because I mean, in all reality, I mean, you would get up to the plate and you'd hit this thing and go, "Oh my God!" Eh, You can't believe the number of people after it got banned who called me and called all my buddies at Easton saying, "Where can we get it? We don't care if it's banned. We'll give you $1,000 for that bat." No, seriously, we did, and of course we couldn't do that because we don't want any legal issues.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
at
so
that,
that's when the parameters came in on what we could do.
and was the standard called BSR, what some people might
It,
remember, or was
yes, ball was it a ball exit speed ratio, the
okay.
BESR, and then that got changed, I think, in 2009 to the current.
Yes. Yeah.
Trying to remember what is the term
BB
today?
core.
BB core, batted ball coefficient of restitution. Right.
You have it, man. You're ready to come out of retirement now, I think.
No, I'm not.
So that's I mean, by 2009, are you kind of used to some rule changes, or is this kind of like like this again, or it's kind of like how do you deal with something like that?
Yeah, it was a little bit irritating in
Yeah.
2009 to me, because from the time that the BESR came into play in 98 until 2009, if you looked at the statistics for the game, they hadn't changed much.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in 2009, they go, okay, now we're going to go immediately to this new standard. Why? With
Yeah.
no notice, by the way, no
Yeah.
notice. And so the bats that were used in 2009, which a kid may have wanted to use the next year,
Mm.
obsolete, couldn't use. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the rules committees, I understand
Yeah.
their thinking, and other times I go, really? Yeah, I mean, come on.
So what makes a great bat? Like when all your time at Easton, was it the sound? Was it the performance? Was it, what kind of made some great bats at Easton?
Well, I think, listen, you played ball. It's feel.
Yeah.
Okay, everything is feel. When it's like any product you buy today, to me, it's like a ball glove. To me, a great ball glove is one that when you put on your hand and you don't even know it's there.
Mm.
It's so comfortable. Well, to me, it's the same with a bat. If you take that bat and you're holding it and you take that swing with it and it feels end heavy,
Mm-hmm.
or visually it looks too thin. I'll give you a great example of this. One of the reasons that Easton didn't succeed back in the mid 70s. Remember, they were competing then with Worth and Louisville Slugger.
Mm.
If you look at some of the old Adirondack bats that Easton made, or the first Easton bats, there was a logo that was linear on the bat.
Mm.
And I remember I heard the story, because this is before I joined the company, but Easton went to Stanford University one day to a practice with the bats. He's going to give them to a couple of to the team. And he asked the kids what they thought about it. And they hit with it. They hit okay with it, but they said, well, we really don't like it. And Easton said, why? And the kids couldn't give him a reason until one of the kids said, well, part of the problem is the barrel looks too thin.
Mm.
Well, it was the same size barrel as the Worth bat, but the Worth bat had no line on it.
Mm.
And by putting that vertical line on, it made the bat visually look thinner to the hitter. So it became, so you're asking me what makes a good bat?
Yeah.
Well, it's all of these factors. One, it has to hit. Obviously, you got to be able to compete with the performance, but it's the sound, it's the look. When we came out with the Black Magic, man, a lot of guys went, whoa, that looks cool. Well,
Yeah.
if it's cool in your mind, and then, but the bottom line, Max, it's like a pair of running shoes or it's a ball glove. It's that feel.
Mm,
and boy, you put that thing in me and you take that first kind of swing with it like that, man, that feels good.
mm.
You know, I think that was it.
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, so also Little League baseball too. It seems like Easton kind of got on the map with it seems like man, the year it was probably 2000. I mean, you were still there, 2014, 2013. What do you remember from those years? Like the Speed Brigade series is what from my memory of that.
We Easton was very fortunate. Came out with a line of bats. Again, you luck out, you get hot.
Yeah.
There's some, and we for about 3 or 4 years, even longer. Um, it just seemed like the engineers did their job, and
Mm,
the graphic designers. There's the other thing you got to give credit to. The designers came up with color schemes, design schemes. The kids just loved,
yeah.
and but listen, glory is fleeting because you can be hot one year,
Yes.
next year you never know.
That's true. So it really is like kind of a team effort. It goes from the engineer to the graphic guy to you going out there, obviously getting feedback from the players too, right?
Absolutely, and the sales reps.
Yes.
Sales reps got to be able to get into those stores and convince dealers to put the bats on the shelves. And of course, now in today's world,
Mm,
that also means the Amazons and the
yes.
and all that stuff.
Wow, that is yeah. So it's quite the process. So what would you say to people that are like, we should go to wood bats, like forget about these aluminum bats? What would you say to those people?
If you want to use wood bats, go ahead. Nobody, no, I would have people get on my case about the aluminum bat,
Yeah,
and we should be using wood.
yeah,
And I said, if you think that, then use it. I mean, well, they'll say, well, that's unfair. I go, that's up to you.
yeah.
I have friends who I play golf with who have clubs that their dads used in the 50s,
Mm,
and they go, well, it's unfair that you use
yeah.
today's clubs. I go, it's only unfair because you're making it unfair for yourself. If you want to use the old persimmon wood driver, then go ahead and use it. Nobody said you couldn't use it.
Yeah.
And if you want to play with guys who only play with those persimmon wood drive, then go ahead and do it.
Mm,
And if you little league organizer or pony league or Babe Ruth league organizer, if your local league you only want to use wood, then do it. Nobody said you can't do that. Nobody's banned wood.
great point. So that's a good point. Normally I engage and argue like, well, you don't want you just. I think I'm going to take your approach. I think that's an easier way to handle that. So
Well. The other thing too is people say, well, the aluminum bat it doesn't teach kids how to hit correctly. Well, I say, okay, that's fine, except in 2020 in the major leagues, you tell me one guy that didn't grow up with them.
yes, that is
You
true.
know, and you hear all, and then you also hear the stories about, well, this guy in college hit 360 using aluminum, and then he got to the pros, and his first year in A ball, he was hitting 220, and he couldn't make the adjustment to wood.
Mm,
Well, two comments I'll make about that. Number one, and Pete Rose, who I know your dad knows. Okay, Pete Rose told me one time. I asked him about that. I said, is it tough for a kid to make an adjustment? Now, Rose is Rose, right?
yeah,
He'll
yeah,
say, but he looked at me like, what are you, nuts? He goes, if you can hit, you can hit.
yeah.
It
Mm,
doesn't matter what, so don't blame the bat if you
yeah.
can't hit. That's not an adjustment at all. That's stupid. And the other thing that I always tell people, okay, yeah, the guy was at Rider College, all right, and he hit 360 and he was all league. Well, then he gets to the Florida State League in pro ball, and he's batting 220.
Mm,
I go, yeah, except that when he's at the Florida State League, now he's facing pitchers who are pro pitchers, dude.
mm,
They're not college guys. They're not a Sunday starter, for college.
yeah, yeah.
Now he's facing some kid from the Dominican Republic that's blowing the ball at 96 miles an hour. It's a little different.
That's a great point. Plus, nowadays, if you're obviously at that level for high school and college, you're using wood, summertime, sometimes fall leagues or wood bats. So like you have enough experience with wood nowadays where it's not just aluminum throughout your career.
Right. Now, here's the last part of this puzzle. Okay, and you think about this when you played ball, okay? And let's say you had an Easton bat
Yeah.
and you're playing high school ball and your dad got that bat for you or you went and got it. and you play 24 games schedule, right, including practices,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the exact same bat
Mm.
every time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let me give you a scenario of a golfer. Golfer is out on the golf course hitting a pretty good round. On the fifth hole, he hits his first two drives into a lake, and now he's really ticked off, right? So he throws his club into the lake and he loses it. Now he's got to borrow a driver from one of the guys he's playing with. Well, do you think he's going to hit as well? You know, or let's say a club breaks,
Yeah.
his 5-iron breaks. Now he's got to borrow the other guy's 5-iron. Well, the odds are he's not going to do as well.
Mm.
Well, think about wood bats. What do wood bats do?
They break. Yeah.
They break.
Yeah.
So you've got a favorite wood bat, and in the fourth game, and you're hitting 300. Fourth game it breaks. Now you got to go get another bat. No two wood bats are alike.
Great.
And I used to say to people, the greatest advantage to using aluminum bat is consistency. Getting the same product every single time.
Oh, I am learning a lot in this conversation. So this is going to be a tough question. This is going to be the last question, then we'll let you get on with your day. Although I could probably talk to you probably for the next hour. But what is your favorite Easton bat of all time?
Oh, the Green Easton.
The Green Easton.
Oh, absolutely.
Now I don't want to give too much away, but I think Little Birdie told me I think they're bringing it back this year, obviously with the BB Core standard for high school / college. So
I don't work there anymore, but I'll tell you, if that's true,
yeah,
you're looking at the happiest guy in the world.
Yeah.
Because I'm at my son's house right now, but at my own house, if I was there, you would see behind me a poster, that famous ad after that first College World Series that had 8 Easton bats on the 9-bat lineup. So that bat to me, that made my career.
Yes.
I mean, that bat, I'll tell you hey, let's be honest here. I'm the luckiest son of a gun in the world because I was able to come on and get into the sporting goods marketing business with 2 lines. Obviously, the Easton with the Green Easton, then of course the Mizuno line, which great products.
How long did you have the Mizuno line for?
Curly. Well, what happened with Curly Bates Company, which was, remember, the marketing company that hired me, they got bought out by Easton. Easton bought Curly Bates and established Easton Sports in 1985.
Okay.
So again, up until that point, Easton was nothing more than a manufacturing company. So then they bought Curly Bates, so now they've become a whole encompassing company. And for 4 years after that, the contract with Mizuno as the distributor stayed in place. So that ended in '89.
Okay, so still some time too. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's and we didn't even talk about it. Easton in the fast pitch market too. Easton in the fast pitch market, they got quite the name in the fast pitch market. Do you remember when Easton did fast pitch come later on, or was it kind of on that same track as baseball?
Fast pitch has always been
Yeah.
a key component because let's face it, there's a big market there. People don't realize how big fast pitch has become. So we always put a lot of effort into it. The problem we had with fast pitch is it took forever to get any television coverage. Whereas baseball started early with ESPN. It wasn't until '96 or even after that, the Olympics of '96, where fast pitch started to get some good publicity via the media.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you for joining me. We'll have to schedule this down the road again and maybe do a part 2 because I'm sure a lot of people are going to like this. Where can they check out your book? What's the name of the book? I'll put the link to the book on Amazon.
Well, it's not on Amazon, believe it or not. I never put it on Amazon. I just sell it. I don't even sell. I mean, I just got books. I mean, if somebody really wants to get one, just have them contact me. I'll give you my email address.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. It's James27Darby@gmail.com. And if somebody's interested, then just have them get in touch with me.
Awesome, man. Well, I really do appreciate it. I hope you and your family stay safe and healthy, and thanks for coming on, man.
My pleasure. Take care, Max.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.